Let's get this out the way first. Look, man. I'm not Comics Explained. I'm not your boy Zach. I'm not the comic historian. I'm not Yellow Flash. I'm none of these guys, man. I started reading comic books literally 6 years ago because I'm from Detroit. I'm from the hood. I did not have a comic book shop near my house. Period. I did not know where to buy a comic book. Okay, so I started buying comic books in 2014 when I learned where I could find a comic book shop using uh, Google Maps or some shit, right? So I'm not that guy. I'm not a traditionalist who are, hanging on to the past. I am a creative. I'm a writer. I'm a thinker. I'm a person who likes to pontificate about things. And I am offended as a black man by New Warriors. This concept of the snowflake and the safe space. This is absolute bullshit. You have a black dude whose head is like a snowball. Not a snowball as if, kids throwing snowballs, but a snowball as in hostess snowball. His fucking head is pink. Why is he pink? Why is his color, why is the color palette the way that it is? Now I can put my Hotep hat on and we can talk about, the effeminization of the black man. If you want to have that conversation, you want to start turning every black man into fucking Billy Porter. No, we don't want to. I don't want to do that though, because again, this is not that channel. Okay, but this offends me on so many different levels, and it hasn't even come out yet. It's completely uncreative. But the worst thing about it is this is Marvel as a big giant corporation outsourcing its risk to another industry, which is the comic book shop. This is a silver bullet to the comic book shop. Okay. Now there are YouTubers that I respect, that I listen to. One of them being Comics Perch. He usually always says, which is usually a free market response, that just don't buy it. You don't like it. You don't like what it looks. Just don't buy it. This is a good free market response. You just leave it there, let it die. Let it die on the vine. Marvel has no choice but to cancel it. Okay, fair enough. I can respect that because I'm a free market guy. I can respect that. But there is something to be said about visual pollution in this way. Okay, the concept of visual pollution comes from when people consider excessive advertising to be visual pollution. So think of Times Square in New York, when you have all of these gigantic buildings, and sometimes you'll have these banners and billboards and all that type of shit, right? Where somebody's constantly trying to sell you something. The socialists will say, well, that's visual pollution. You're being bombarded with images that, is trying to incentivize you to purchase things that you might not want and that you might not have. And in some places, they have banned it. So you don't really get a lot of, or they'll put a limit on how much you can advertise in a particular place. Cultures are different. And I think Latin America is one of those countries where, I think Brazil maybe, but that's just me talking out of my ass. I know there are Latin American countries where they have visual pollution laws. That's what this shit is, okay? This shit will sit on the shelf infinitum. It's never going to leave. The only way this shit is going to actually leave the shelf is if people buy it to make fun of it on YouTube. That's it. Nobody's going to buy this stuff. This is a silver bullet to comic book shops. And we have been told time and time again by people on Twitter, by the executives at Marvel, that we are not the person who sits down, pays their $4.99, $3.99 for the comic book. You're not the intended audience. The intended audience is the comic book shop, the publisher. Those are the people that they work for. As a writer, I work for this particular editor, and I don't work for you. You don't have to buy my books. The editor has to just like what I wrote. And it's like, okay, so we need to take this up a notch. We need to say, not only am I not going to buy New Warriors, that if you're going to keep trying to sell me shit like this, I'm not going to buy fucking Spider-Man either. I'm not going to buy the Avengers either. And this is what you need. People need to have these interventions with their comic book shops. And you need to say, this is some unsellable shit. This is going to kill your shop. And I don't want to deal with this visual pollution of every time I come in here, there's stacks and stacks and stacks of dollar bins of this type of shit. Because again, we also heard that if you listen to Comic Book Perch, he runs a comic book shop. He talks about, dollar bins not really being the best thing for a comic book shop, because it shows that you have a lot of things that you can't sell, and this says it all, right? They're not going to sell this, and everybody knows it. It's not a surprise to anyone. They're not going to be able to sell this stuff. So why would a comic book shop buy it? Other than to just have the pollution in the area. And I look at Marvel like a decaying husk, like a dying tree. Like trees are old. Trees get pretty goddamn old. But when they get old, they get hollow. There's more, when a leaf falls from the treetop, it's dead. It's dead before it hits the ground. Okay? Now, it hasn't turned brown yet and all that shit, but it's dead. Because it has no connection to anything that could give it life. So eventually it becomes a time where there's more leaves at the foot of the tree than there is in the treetops. And Marvel is getting to that point where they have more comics that you're not going to buy than more comics than you actually will. And I'm not one of those negative people either, because I believe that there are some Marvel comics worth buying. Thor is one of them. Donny Cates is doing pretty good on Thor. I'm buying Thor. But there's a whole slew of other things that I'm not even looking at, But it's visual pollution. It's in the fucking way. That's for sure. Like it's there. It's front and center in your goddamn face, but you're not going to buy it. So let's talk about the characters now. We talked about Marvel. The characters themselves are absolutely ridiculous. Okay? But there's one little allegory here that I think that's really interesting. Safe Space can build force fields around other people, but he can't protect himself. So he can build force fields around others, but not himself. And you know what's interesting to me about that is that when I sit back and I think about that in a different way. I take a different perspective on that. Let's talk about that from the perspective of male politics, let's say. Because a man can mansplain feminism to any woman. He can take a bullet. He can jump on any feminist grenade. But if he dares say something about himself, tries to protect himself, the hashtag not all men, well, now he's being problematic. His allyship is being questioned because, well, how dare you talk that incel, MRA talk, So you can defend others, you're not allowed to defend yourself, right? So you can build force fields around women, gays, other minorities, but you're not allowed to build force fields around men. If you're a black man, you're not allowed to build a force field around yourself. Only in respects to white people, right? You could talk about, oh, the white man beat me down, man, blah, blah, blah. But you can't talk about all these Negroes that's out here, shooting up the club and all that type of stuff. You can't do that. Because that's a different kind of black people. That's the politically correct black people. You can't talk about them. You can't talk about the single mamas. You can't talk about them. But you can sit here all day and talk about how terrible the white man is and how terrible the Jews are. That type of stuff is acceptable, So you're allowed to defend other people, not really allowed to defend yourself. Now and it's almost like they did it by accident, and I'm pretty sure if people make enough noise about that, like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because you can go on Twitter and you can say kill all men as a man and not get banned. You can say, believe all women, all men need to learn not to rape, and you won't get banned. That's perfectly fine. You can jump on any feminist train. That's just fine. You can defend any woman for any reason. That's perfectly fine. But if you try to defend a man, even if you make a compelling, well thought out, well sourced argument, you'll get labeled a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And that's just how it is. That's the world that we live in. And now that's the character that Marvel has encrusted into the New Warriors. A character that could defend everybody but himself. So there it is. You're so woke, you done did a 360 on woke. You done woke yourself into a twist. You're like the Ouroboros of woke. you know. But hey, go for it, you know. But I'm telling you, man, I have these conversations with my comic book shop. Please stop buying it. Stop ordering this shit. Please, please stop ordering this shit. Comic book shops are good places, man. You can go there. It's usually pretty cool. It's pretty chill. If you get a good, honest comic book shop, they will tell you, like, man, we don't sell none of this shit. This shit just sits and sits and sits. You know, but you need to tell them, like, we probably just won't buy any future anything, any future Spider-Man, any future of these crazy Iron Man events and all that type of stuff. We're not buying none of that shit. If this comes with it, you know, like if this comes with it, we're not buying it. Like, think about it in terms of a restaurant, right? Like if you found out that there's rats in the chicken noodle soup, you're not going to buy anything that's in that restaurant, right? You're not going to go in there and be like, okay, well, I just won't buy the chicken noodle soup. They'll be like, nah, they got a big fucking problem in there. They got a complete health problem in there. Like, we living in the coronavirus era where you can't even go outside, right? So people are like, you know, any individual you run into might be infected, but Marvel is infected and DC is infected, Image is infected. All of these companies are infected with the same ideology, and comic book shops keep accepting that risk because, well, they might get the next Saga, you know, because Saga sold a lot of copies and, you know, it's really woke and there's non-binary and every other character is gay and all that type of stuff. And hey, maybe that works for some books. If it's a particularly well-written book or something like that, maybe that works. But for the vast majority of people, this stuff is just visual pollution. It's a waste of time. You just walking past this type of shit is too much for the retina sometimes. You know, sometimes it's just too much to even look in this shit's direction. And if you run a comic book shop, man, if you run a comic book shop, you know anybody who runs a comic book shop, you might want to just sit down with them, you know, call Vice Network or whatever, A&E, and set up an intervention, because obviously they're just addicted to losing money, you know, and say, look, if you're gonna have a cool spot where we can all play games and have comic nights and sign-ups and all that type of stuff, you have to stay in business. And if you're gonna keep letting people take advantage of you like this, look, Marvel can waste money all day. They have billions of dollars from Disney, and they have $1 billion from the movies. They'll be fine. It's you gonna be fucked in the game. You know, you need to take a stand and stand up for yourself. Stop being like, you're like the anime protagonists at this point. You know, where there's always the bullies in the anime, and push you around and kneeing you in the face and pulling your teeth out and all that crazy stuff. You know, like that's what Marvel is doing to comic book shops. They're just bullying you. You know, they got you buying all these fucking crazy variants and all these stupid ass events, and they're just gobbling it up, and it's just sitting. You know, the comic book shop I frequent has not even gotten rid of the Marvel Generations shit yet. There's stacks and stacks and stacks of that shit left. There's stacks and stacks and stacks of fucking Spider-Man 700 or whatever the hell that was with the Red Goblin on it. You know, there's still like hundreds of that shit still left. Like, eventually, it's going to reach critical mass, you know. And I think you need to do it for yourself, you know, for your own, to create your own safe space. Stop ordering this shit. Just stop. Boycott this shit. Or, fuck it. I might have to change my tune and just say, fuck the comic book shops. If they're not going to stand up for themselves, why am I wasting my time? All right. Again, I'm not not Comics Explained, not comic historian, not going to pretend that I'm an OG in the comic book industry. I've read a lot of old stuff. I read some new stuff. I read current stuff. I read some stuff in between. You know, this is the type of shit that anybody I've ever met is interested in. I've never met anybody, even the people who look like these characters, are not buying this stuff. They're not. They read manga. Because when weird people want to hear from authentically real weird people, they don't want to hear weird stuff from corporate shills. It's just not what they into, you know? But they can keep trying, I guess. All right, I'll see you guys later.